Good morning all. So we continue with our character introduction for Anne in Spectacles today. As usual then, there is a do now task for you. Give yourself some time to answer the above questions. So what is the relationship between Eva Smith and Mr. Berlin? How would you describe Sybil Berlin and how would you describe Sheila Berlin? Write your answers in your book and then move on to the next slide to hear my responses. Okay, so I'm hoping you've had a go at the above questions. So what is the relationship between Eva Smith and Mr. Berlin? Their relationship was that Mr. Berlin was Eva Smith's boss and unfortunately fired her when she asked for more money. How would you describe Sybil Berlin? The key words I'd be thinking about are this idea of her being cold, so she doesn't have the maternal instincts we would expect from a woman in this period, and that perhaps she's uncaring even though she works for the charitable organisation. And this idea that she's her husband's social superior, so she is from the upper class, he's from the middle class, so at times she might break out of her stereotypical female role because of her social status in comparison to her husband's. And then Sheila Berlin. Sheila is kind of a little bit atypical in this sense because she is somebody who does learn her lesson throughout the play, although in the beginning she seems a very naive young woman who's very excited about the prospects of her future. As she learns more information about her family and about Gerald, she begins to become a little bit more independent, and we see a side to her that we actually quite like and we respect because she's willing to take responsibility for the things that she has done. Okay. So today we're going to have a look at Eric Berlin. So just as an image, okay, this is one of the ways that Eric has been casted in a production. You can see that obviously he is quite young, very typical of the upper class, you know, he looks very smart in the image. So the way that Eric Berlin is described in the beginning of the play is Eric is in his early 20s, not quite at ease, half shy and half assertive. So again, give yourself 5 minutes, copy the quote out and have a think about your own initial response to that. So what do you think this suggests about his character? Think about this idea of not being quite at ease, half shy, half assertive. What might that suggest about him as a character? I'm going to go quiet, or you might want to pause me, and then I will give you my ideas after. Okay then, so we're going to break down Eric as a character together. So obviously he's in his early 20s, so we can see this contrast. Him and Sheila are about the same age. That's really important in terms of responsibility, but also in order to look at their gender roles, because obviously they're both the same age, but the way that they're treated within the family is quite different. So this idea of not quite at ease. Okay, so even though Eric is in his own home for the whole play, he's never comfortable, and that might suggest that either there's some tension within the family, or that maybe as a character he's quite nervous, okay, and he's quite uncomfortable in the position that he's been given. And again, this is not something that we would want from a male character during this time period. You know, he's supposed to be the man who's going to take over the family business next. And if he's not comfortable in his own home and he's not comfortable within his own family, is he going to be comfortable being the boss of a company? And that's where Mr. Berlin and Eric's tension comes from. And then we've got kind of this oxymoron here. So we've got half shy, half assertive. So obviously if we look at half shy to begin with, we can think about the fact that someone shy doesn't show confidence. So again, we're questioning him as a patriarchal male character. Is he going to be strong enough to own the business? Is he going to be strong enough to have a family of his own? If he's shy, he's obviously going to lack confidence, isn't he? And then we have this contrast of being half assertive. So actually, in moments, he does have the qualities that we'd want from a son, and he does have the qualities we'd want from a boss. So I suppose the idea is that, you know, he's kind of halfway there in becoming this very stereotypical male, but at the same time he's not, okay? And obviously in contrast to Gerald, who we're going to look at next, he is very atypical. You know, he is willing to take responsibility, he's not so interested in the business. He also kind of questions Mr. Berlin when he talks about, you know, not giving the women a pay rise. So we can see this kind of half shy, half assertive means that there's two sides to Eric. And it could perhaps be that, you know, in scenarios with his father, he feels he needs to be assertive to try and get his respect. But when he's actually out in society, he's not very comfortable and he's quite shy. And that could obviously lead to lots of kind of devastating situations. So again, as you've done with the previous lessons, today you are going to become the director. I want to know who would you cast as Eric. So again, it could be an actor or actress who's currently in the media, or you could decide to draw someone who you think portrays the character the best. And why would you choose to present him in that way? What about that kind of look, that image, makes you think, yes, that's exactly how I imagine Eric to look? And when you finish that, we're going to move on to Gerald Croft. Okay, so we're going to move on to Gerald now. You may realise that obviously I've decided to look at Eric and Gerald in today's lesson because they are two characters that we can kind of contrast as well. So Sybil and Sheila were very similar. Gerald is slightly older than Eric, so Eric is obviously in his mid-20s and Gerald's in his 30s. So we could suggest that maybe Gerald is, kind of a later version of what Eric may become as he's a bit older. But we also can see that they're quite contrasting in their character profiles in the way that they are and the way that they act. So obviously the idea is that Gerald is the kind of son you would want and the kind of boss you would want, whereas Eric we're a bit unsure of. So you can see from the image, obviously Gerald looks a little bit older than Eric. He also just looks a little bit more well put together, his hair's short, he looks quite smart. Eric kind of has this look of wonder on his face, whereas Gerald seems to be very focused and very well concentrated. So Gerald is described as an attractive chap about 30, rather too manly to be a dandy, but very much the well-bred young man about town. So again, give yourself 5 minutes to have a look at that quotation, copy it down into your books, and see if you can analyse it, see if you can think about what it might be suggesting. Again, look at the key terms of attractive chap, rather too manly to be a dandy, and very much the well-bred young man about town. Again, I'm going to go quiet, or you might want to pause me, and then I'll go over my analysis next. Okay then, so we're going to have a look at Gerald now. So to start off with, an attractive chap. Very similar to obviously the idea of Sheila, during this time period, appearance was a big part of you getting married and you doing your duty within the upper class society. Men were obviously known for being quite notorious during this time period, so for someone as attractive as Gerald, it doesn't come as a surprise to us that he, has an affair with a young lady. So this idea of being attractive, although it's not, it's not the be all and end all, it is an important quality for this young man because he's supposed to be, this very well-to-do upper class man that Sheila has to marry. This idea of being rather too manly to be a dandy then. Obviously during this time period, homosexuality was not accepted within society. And to be a dandy was often a euphemism used to suggest that somebody was homosexual. So what we're suggesting is, even though Gerald is attractive, he's not too attractive. He's manly at the same time as being as having a nice appearance. So one way that people used to say we could pick out if someone was a homosexual was if they looked nice and they dressed well, which obviously isn't true. It's a very subjective comment. People can dress however they want, and we shouldn't make suggestions about their sexuality. But during this time period, stereotypes were very prominent. So this idea that he's rather too manly to be dandy suggests that although he's a pretty boy, he is very manly, and there's no homosexuality claims that are going to go in the background for him. So this idea of being a real manly man is very important. And then also this idea of being a well-bred young man about town. So he's from an upper class family. Obviously birth was a big kind of thing during this time. Your family was a big part of your upbringing. So he's a well-bred young man about town. So people in town wanted their daughters to marry him because of his social status. And Arthur Burden often says, your mother's not mad that you're marrying down. So we know Gerald Croft is obviously from the upper class again, and Sheila's bordering that kind of middle class, upper class because of her parents' different social statuses. So, he is essentially the perfect guy in society that your parents wanted you to marry, and he was going to make your social standing so much better. So the portrayal of Gerald is very contrasting to Eric. Eric's half shy, half assertive. You're not sure if you want him in the building or not. Gerald, you absolutely want to marry. And obviously we find out that both men do despicable things with Eva Smith. So I suppose the idea is that perhaps looks are a bit deceiving. So again, you are now going to become the director. I want to know who you would cast to be Gerald, and also why you would present them in that way. So this is your final slide, okay? And I just want you to think about the work that we've done over the last week, okay? Obviously, in your exam, it's not necessarily going to matter who you like, but I do think it's important that you get a chance to put your own opinions across about characters in texts. So at the moment, who would you say is your favourite character and why would you suggest that? Next week, we are going to move on to reading Act 1. Okay, I'm going to send you an online PDF version. I realise that it is going to be difficult for you to read the play because you're not going to have that many characters, but it isn't impossible and I know you can do it. Okay, enjoy your weekend and I'll see you on Monday.